Thank you all. In 1947, W.H. Auden wrote a lengthy poem called The Age of Anxiety, because that was kind of the spirit of the time, and I think that age has extended to our days as well. In Luke's Gospel, Jesus tells Martha, 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 you're anxious and upset about many things. One thing alone is required. We know Martha. We are Martha. The frantic patient bursts into the psychologist's office and blurts out, "Doctor, you have to help me. I think I'm a wigwam and a teepee." "Relax," the doctor said. "You're just too tense." If we could harness the anxiety right now on this campus and down at the Chicago campus because of midterms, we probably could find an alternative form of energy to make us less dependent on foreign oil. Because it seems we never know enough, and we never have enough, and we never are enough. Lisa Fortini Campbell, adjunct professor at the Kellogg School of Management, is my teacher and my friend, my colleague, and fellow worshiper at Shield Catholic Center. The interesting title of her presentation is Healing the Anxious Heart, Finding the Path from Busyness to Peace, in which she will address the question, how can I find a peaceful heart in the midst of a busy life? I'm happy to be here to present her to you and to listen and learn with you this evening. And I'm sure that you're all anxious to follow the path that she is going to show us, the path to peace. Please welcome Dr. Lisa Fortini Campbell.
Thank you, everybody. That was so lovely. Thanks, Father Kevin, and thank you all for being here. It just is a delight and a pleasure to talk about something tonight with people who I think we share all of these difficulties and challenges together. And so what I hope I can do tonight is offer a little bit of a reflection on this subject that comes from my own thoughts and experiences that may dovetail with your own ideas, and together we can leave tonight with some thoughts about where and how we can find a little more peace in these lives that are inevitably very busy. So the title is, of course, Healing the Anxious Heart. Now, having thought about it since I chose this title, I have talked to lots and lots of people. And students here at Northwestern, colleagues at Kellogg, friends in the parish, friends outside, people all over. And if I could name it again, I would rename it Stop the World, I Want to Get Off, because this is what people say to me. And as we all agree, this busyness and this frenzy is a part of our lives, and we all think we've got it the worst. Students come to me and they say, it's an overwhelming pressure with the course load and the extracurricular activities. I barely have time to sleep, let alone pray and worship the way I want. If there are young parents, and there are among my acquaintance, it goes without saying, their lives are just up to the brim in how much they have to do. People who are mid-late career like I am, they're often sandwiched between two generations, parents and family they're caring for, children they're watching over, and a career they're still trying to build toward its ultimate conclusion. And I think if anybody's like me, you think if I could just get through this next assignment, I can get through the next week, I can get through the next year, I can make it till retirement, then it will all smooth out and things will be fine. But it won't. It won't. My best girlfriend is now 70 years old, and she's been retired for 5 years. And when I call Sharon on the phone, she says to me, Lisa, I don't know how I had time to work. I am so busy. It's even funny. I have a very dear friend in Boston. Father Henry is now 95. He's in a nursing home. He's confined to a wheelchair. And he's so busy. When I ask Father Henry, how are you? He says, I am just so busy. As soon as I get back from breakfast, I want to come in my room for some quiet prayer, and someone bursts into my room, shouts out, "Time for yoga," and they wheel me out. So poor Father Henry, I think it's never going to end. So we have to find some other way through this. And I think we do need to find some other way through this. And you would all agree, or you wouldn't be here tonight. There is a sense that God is sometimes slipping through the cracks. My friends who are students at Kellogg sometimes say that the pressure of working on that MBA has them all saying to themselves, "Please, God, can you sit in this corner over here and wait for me 2 years till I'm done? I promise I'll come back. I promise I'll come back." And they know they don't want it to be that way, but that is often the way it is. So in honor of them, in honor of us, and of all of us, I want to just tell you what I've been thinking about this subject in the hopes that it will help you. So Father Henry knows that busyness is taking him away from his prayer life. You and I know that somehow we suspect it's taking us away in ways we don't want to. But these two men actually proved that it does. So on the screen here, you'll see Daniel Batson and John Darley. These are two professors at Princeton University in the Department of Social Psychology. They're both quite famous men now because their stream of research that they've developed over many years is focused on how and when do people make moral decisions or fail to do so. We have a sense of ethics, we have a sense of principles, and we try to act on them all the time, but sometimes we don't. And so their curious question is, when don't people, and why? So one of the theories they had, actually, was that when people are really busy, they get pulled off their moral compass. And to test whether or not that was a provable hypothesis, they did a very interesting experiment back in 1973. So these men invited seminarians from the Princeton Theological Seminary to participate in an experiment. Each seminarian who volunteered was invited to write a short sermon on the parable of the Good Samaritan. And then they were told that once they were finished, they would go across the campus and record it in an audio studio for some coaching. So the seminarians prepared their work, and they were sorted into one of three conditions, unbeknownst to them. One condition, a third of the seminarians were put under a lot of time pressure. As soon as they were finished with their sermon, they were told, "You're late already. They're set up, they're waiting for you, you have to leave now, get going." Another third of the men were told, "You're ready, they're ready for you, a little time pressure, please leave right away, and as soon as you arrive, they'll be ready to start." And the last third was told, "You have all the time in the world. Leave when you want, get over there when you can, even when you arrive, they'll have to wait a while until it's time for them to do the recording." So when it was each their turn, one by one, the seminarians left, but the experimenters arranged to have an actor impersonate a man in distress right in their path. Just like the Good Samaritan. So they walk along, and then they see a man doubled over, groaning, coughing, clearly in need of help. And so the question is, do the seminarians stop or not? So this study is now a classic in social psychology. You will find it in every undergraduate textbook because, very sadly, not a lot of those seminarians did. When they were under no time pressure whatsoever, 60% of them stopped. When there was just a little bit of time pressure, 45% of them stopped. And if there was a lot of time pressure, only 10% of those seminarians stopped, and the experimenters actually watched young men climb over the body of the man in their way to get to a recording studio to talk about the parable of the Good Samaritan. So this is really, it's interesting what our reaction to this is, because I think it's tempting to say, well, these sanctimonious young men, they've written about this parable, and now that they have a chance to actually practice what they're about to preach, they miss the opportunity. But for all of us who live in the midst of these really active and busy lives, who never ever see the end of our tasks, I think we can be a little sympathetic. I don't know if you feel like me. Sometimes I think I can't do what I want to do. I can't do what I'm meant to do. I can't do what God calls me to do because there is too much to do. And in the gospel reading last Sunday, a story came up, a parable from the Gospel of St. Matthew that just struck me very hard. It's the story where Jesus compares the kingdom of heaven to a banquet the king is giving for the wedding of his son. And you know the story. So everybody is invited, and the invited guests don't come. And so the king sends out for anybody who will come, and a bunch of people come, and one guy gets thrown out, the man who's not wearing the proper wedding garment. So most of the time when this gospel is preached on, people focus on that odd event of the man who comes to the feast and then is asked to leave. But when I was thinking about that and reading over that story, it was really interesting to me. The original invited guests get the invitation, and the scripture says some ignored the invitation and went away, one to his farm and another to his business. And so 2,000 years ago, I guess they were just as busy as we are. And so it makes me wonder, am I walking away from the invitation of the king to the wedding banquet of his son every single day of my life? If I believe the kingdom of heaven is now and the hand is out, come to the table, am I walking right by in all of the little ways that I am invited to live out my faith in life? And probably I am. And I don't know about you, it scares me to death. I don't want that to be my life. So when I think about this, when business school professors preach about that Good Samaritan story and that experiment Darley and Batson did, they use it to illustrate a concept they call cognitive overload. So cognitive overload is very obvious jargon that just means you have too much on your mind. Focus where you want to focus. So cognitive overload, business school professors teach us, it will knock you off your priorities, it will distort your focus, and we use it to explain all kinds of failures in principled leadership everywhere. So what is the solution? Well, the solution we say is easy, and you probably heard it preached from 100 pulpits. Say no, slow down, get it off your plate, and make room for prayer. Make room for worship. Make room for service. If you just do less, then the peace of God will settle on you like the dewfall. Except I'm not really sure about that. And the reason I'm not sure about that is going back to that experiment on the parable of the Good Samaritan. And you remember those men who were under no time pressure at all? 60% of them stopped. So I want to know, what about that 40%? Because if the theory is right, and if we just clear the decks, then 40% is a big number. At least I think it's a huge number of people who had all the time in the world and still didn't do what they were about to preach. So it makes me wonder if really the problem isn't busyness, but it's something else entirely. So I decided to test this hypothesis in my own life. There is a time in my life where I am granted a space with absolutely nothing to do. Because like Father Henry, 95 in the nursing home, I practice yoga. And at the end of every yoga practice, if there's any yoga practitioners in here, we are all given time to assume this pose, Shavasana, corpse pose. We lie in repose, letting all of the work we've done in the class be absorbed into our bodies as we do nothing but stay alert and breathe. The air comes in your nostrils, it goes out, in and out. Quiet, peace, settling over your heart. which for me works for about exactly 4 breaths. And then what I start doing is planning my grocery list, and I start worrying about what I'm going to wear to work tomorrow, and I'm thinking through some conversation I had with somebody that made me mad yesterday, and I'm thinking about the traffic on the way home. And so I am not doing, except I am doing still in my mind. I'm physically not active, but in my mind I am active. And the active mind that is doing nothing physical, I would call this anxiety. The yogis call this tendency monkey mind, which is a nice way to talk about it, actually. It's a very evocative image because as your mind just starts going, it is like a monkey swinging through the trees of everything that you have done, everything you're about to do, everything you're in the middle of doing. You just can't stop thinking. So what happens to us all is our life becomes one treadmill of senseless activity. The little cartoon on the screen I like a lot. It's a man and his dog walking into the landscape, and of course, one of them is mindful, focused on the landscape. The other one is mindful, focused of all of that anxiety. And so to me, even though we all complain we're busy and everybody comes to me and says, what advice can you give me about managing my calendar better? The truth of the matter is the taproot of it all is, I think, anxiety. And so as Father Kevin said in his introduction, that story about Mary and Martha is a story about all of us. Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need for only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her. So when, at first, when I think about this gospel, I think, well, it's a criticism of hospitality, it's a criticism of activity, it's an idea that what we should all just do is sit and do nothing. And of course, I know that that's not true. And we focus a lot on Martha being anxious, as we are all anxious, but the interesting one to me in here is Mary, because Jesus says she has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her. So that must mean if I choose the better part, it will not be taken from me either. And by contrast, maybe Martha has chosen to, in that way that we all fail to make a deliberate choice, and so we have chosen non-choice. But the Mary choice is a very, very hard choice. I think as I contemplate this, choosing to focus on peace in the midst of my daily life and busy world is another way that Jesus is asking me to transcend my human nature in order to participate more fully in his. So to live in the world and not be of the world. Put on the mind of Christ. This is what we're asked all the time to do, and this is one difficult thing for one little human being to accomplish, and accomplish consistently. So because I like metaphors, I was thinking about a metaphor that might work as this, and the one I came up with is kind of odd. I think that Jesus is asking us to do with our human nature what circus trainers ask dogs to do in the circus. Get up on their hind legs and walk. Now, we've all seen dogs do this in the circus, and they're funny when they do. They can actually do it for a minute, 2 minutes. They can walk a little bit, but they're not built for this. They can be encouraged for it. Up, 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 says the trainer. And I think this is what Christ says to us. Up, up, up. Participate in my nature. And I'm like that little dog. Can't quite do it. And so, feeling sorry for myself, what is the first thing I want? I want some external help. Wouldn't it be nice if I'm that dog and I could have something that would brace my legs up and keep me working? Sort of like I could have perfect posture if I just wore one of these. Now, if any of you is a fan of Downton Abbey, you know that Michelle Dockery plays Lady Mary, and they all wear these gorgeous dresses and corsets. And Michelle Dockery was interviewed, and she said how much she loved wearing a corset in that show because she could have the perfect posture she's always wanted without ever working for it. And sometimes I think too that those of us who are Christian, we really wish We could stand up without having to work so hard. People say to me, oh, I wish the 1950s were back. I wish the culture was supportive of what we believe and want. I would stand up so much more easily. But that cultural corset we know is gone. And frankly, I don't want to be a Christian who needs a corset anyway. To be able to stand up tall and firm like a ballerina does, that beautiful posture, she's not wearing a corset. She's got a core muscles that are so strong, they hold her upright no matter what gravity is pushing down on her. And so to me, this is what I want to aim for, that erect posture that holds my spiritual life up and holds me like Mary in the midst of an active life at peace. Now, we know Mary did it, but I draw a lot of encouragement from another story in the gospel where somebody is actually able to do this. And this also comes from the Gospel of St. Matthew. You know the story of Peter walking on the water. So this is a man who literally did something no human being can do. Christ is in the hills praying. The apostles are in the boat on the sea. In the middle of the night, he comes walking on the water to them, and they're afraid. They say, it's a ghost, it's a ghost. He says, no, be not afraid. It is I. Be not afraid. Always that encouragement. I love that phrase. It appears 350 times in the Bible. The single most common phrase there is, fear not, be not afraid, up, up, up. You can do this. And so Peter says, okay, and he gets out of the boat and he walks. Until, of course, the wind kicks up and he gets scared and the winds go and he sinks. Lord, save me. And Jesus says to him, oh, ye of little faith, why did you doubt? You can do this. And so if he says we can do this, then we can do this. I absolutely believe we can do this. So the question is, how am I going to do this? So I've actually had some good advice from this good man, Pope Francis. So Pope Francis lives in the guest house in Rome, and the guest house in Rome is actually called St. Martha's house, which I like a lot. That's a nice irony. And he gives a homily there at Mass every day that he's in to celebrate. And I read one that he wrote a couple of months ago. He says, remain in the Lord. The Christian is a man or woman who knows how to keep watch over his heart. And many times our heart, with so many things that come and go, it seems like a local market. Everything you can find there. This is why vigilance is necessary. And so I think in those few words where he tells Martha, you've become anxious and worried, he's saying, Martha, you've let your heart be a marketplace. And you are exerting no vigilance, no discernment. And so you gotta be better at this. A servant is a vigilant one. And so Mary chose very differently, as the Pope says. And he says that in order to focus ourselves, we need to test things. This is from the Lord, and this is not, in order to remain in the Lord. Do I test what I think, what I want, what I desire, or do I accept it all without discernment? So many times, our heart is like a road. Everything passes there. So put it to the test. Put it to the test. Do I always choose the things that come from God? Do I even know which things come from God? Do I know the true criterion by which to discern my thoughts and my desires? And so I take from what the Pope is saying that our job is discernment and the exercise of that, so that sometime, eventually, we can be like Mary. I'm sure that sometime that night she got up and did some work, but she did it with a heart centered on God, full of peace. And so as she went through her daily life, she walked on water. So how do we get this discernment? And so I've thought about this. How am I going to get this discernment, since I have a heart that's a marketplace and a traffic jam road? What am I going to do? Put this to the test. So I've got to learn to grow this erect, strong core to hold me up. So I say to myself, where is my anxiety most intense? And immediately, of course, it's at work. All kinds of things are driving me crazy at work. But I realized that being such a rank beginner at the process of discernment, I couldn't start trying to remove anxiety there. There's just too much that's not in my control. And I'm connected in such a web of responsibility to other people that I just don't have that much degree of freedom. So what I decided to do, as I became a little more practiced at this, was to make my discernment about anxiety focus on my leisure life. Am I actually making the default choice to be anxious in my leisure? Because if I am, then that's a pretty silly thing to be doing. And in my leisure, I have total control over what I do. I'm the one who's choosing, so I'm going to practice there. What I realized that is, in fact, I am choosing anxiety, lazy choice of anxiety, in 3 different ways. There may be other ways, but I hope these ways are a little stimulating for you too. They certainly were revealing to me. So one way is that I failed to choose calm and let myself get immensely agitated in my leisure life. Another thing I do is I fail to choose substance and end up with very empty relationships in my leisure life. And then the last one, I don't have good words for it. I'm saying that I am not choosing elevation, but instead am choosing degradation. And I mean that I'm not choosing what lifts up my heart. I am, by default, letting it be pulled down by the choices I make in my leisure. So these are like exercises, and I am committed to trying to exercise. So the first exercise is a really easy one. This is a plain old sit-up. Anybody can do this. Just lie down on the ground, bend your knees, pull your trunk up, and that's it. So choosing calm over agitation, I think, is the easiest thing anybody can do, and it was for me. I was inspired to do this by a friend of mine at St. Francis Xavier, where I was worshiping a couple of years ago. And I go to Mass every day at St. Francis at 6:30 in the morning, and on Wednesdays we would have coffee and donuts. People volunteered to bring them in. So one day I'm standing there with my friend Angela, eating a donut, sipping on coffee, and Angela said, "Oh, it's so wonderful to come to Mass every day. But I tell you, Lisa, it takes the entire Mass for me to calm down from all the agitation that I have on the way getting here." I said, "Angela, why?" She says, "Well, I get in the car, I turn on talk radio, and in the 10 minutes I'm here, I am ready to pull my hair out." So I said to her, "Angela, why don't you turn the radio off?" And she said, "Well, then how would I know what's going on?" So I'm sure at the time I had a little self-satisfied smirk at my friend Angela, who could not turn the radio off. But then I thought to myself, am I doing this too somewhere else in my leisure life? And you bet I am. So in those days, a while back, I was kind of a politics junkie, and I use that word kind of deliberately. And it was the first thing I did in the morning was look at the newspaper, look at the news, see what was going on in Washington. And of course, it made me mad right away. No matter who's in charge, I'm mad because there's scandal, there's incompetence, there's waste. By the time I am ready to have breakfast in the morning, I am already apoplectic. And then the really bad thing is because I've let myself get so agitated like this, it bleeds everywhere in my life. So because it's what I know about, it's what I talk about. And when Alan and I go off on a nice walk in the afternoon, what am I going on and on about? A bunch of people in Washington, D.C., who will never know me, whom I don't know either, and I can't control or influence at all. And so I've created this agitation. Like Peter on the water, instead of the wind blowing, I blew the wind up myself, and now I'm sinking. So I thought, all right, one Lent, I decided as a Lenten practice, I'm stopping. For 40 days, I'm turning it off. And I did for 40 days, and I haven't gone back. I asked myself, could I be a responsible voter and a good citizen and not know everything going on every single minute of every single day in Washington, D.C.? Every bubbling scandal, every rumor, every instance of incompetence, could I still be a good voter? Well, yeah, I can. And so I let it go. And a peacefulness has come into my heart because I can use that time for something else. A quiet conversation, time for prayer reflection, a chance to read some scripture in the morning, whatever it is, anything. It's active, it's busy, but it's operating out of peace. So I was able to scrub that out of my life. And now I've had to recently scrub another one out of my life. I think it's kind of an amusing one. I fly a lot for my work, and I'm a very nervous flyer. So the only thing that gives me any comfort and reassurance is to watch the Weather Channel 6 hours a day to make sure that I know where every thunderstorm is, in the hope that my pilot will avoid them all and I won't have any bumps. Okay. So I like the Weather Channel. It's on the internet bookmark. It's on my phone on an app. But you know what they have done lately? Have you noticed this too? Not only have they started naming every hurricane, but they've started naming every heat wave, every thunderstorm, every rainstorm, and pretty soon, we're going to have raindrop Hercules causing havoc in our lives. It agitates me. And so I thought, okay, I need to know what's going on. I can't do it this way because it's making me crazy. And so I get rid of the Weather Channel. I have a little Yahoo app on the phone, and I'm done with it. A calmness back in my life. I have to keep scrubbing it out. You can't do these exercises once, or at least I can't do these exercises once and make any real progress. So I wonder, in your lives, is there agitation like this? And if there is, could you do something different to give yourself the gift of calm and the gift of peace that lets you stand a little bit more upright the way we're all intended to be? So that's one, and that's the easy one. The second one is a harder exercise, and so this is a Pilates boat pose. This one takes a lot more core strength to do, and to do it well. And I use it as my exercise and symbol of choosing emptiness over substance in my leisure life. And I was inspired to think along these lines by this lovely lady you see coming up on the screen. Her name is Helen Alt, and she's my husband Alan's grandmother on his mother's side. So Grandma has passed away now, but she was a wonderful lady and a model of Christian discipline, which I never appreciated until years after she died. Back in 1994, you might remember, there was a huge media event going on in this country, and it was the O.J. Simpson trial. The trial of the century, it was called. Began in November of 94, and it went on for almost a year. It was on TV. People watched every day. I watched it on TV all the time, and it was what everybody talked about at work. And then in October of 1995, the jury was released to deliberate. 4 hours later, they came back. Now, in that time, when they were about to come back, very interesting things happened here in the U.S. Telephone call volume dropped by 58% while people waited for that verdict. Trading on the New York Stock Exchange dropped by 41%. Water usage declined all over the country. People didn't even want to go to the bathroom. And Domino's Pizza, the biggest pizza company in America, had absolutely no orders anywhere in the United States in the minutes before that jury came back. And then when they did, well, you know what they decided: not guilty. So that Thanksgiving, just a few weeks later, Alan and I and all of the extended family traveled to Western Maryland, where Grandma lived, to have a Thanksgiving dinner. And everybody is sitting around the table, and the conversation is the O.J. trial. Was it fair? Wasn't it fair? Was he guilty? Wasn't he guilty? And Grandma's sitting next to me. She nudges me with her arm and she says, "Who's O.J.?" And I think I must just have looked at her like she was a crazy woman. How could she not know who the single most important cultural icon of the day was. Now, this is not a lady who was some country bumpkin shut in rural Maryland. This is a woman who had a work schedule that would put Martha to shame. She had a TV, she had a newspaper. But what she had was a core strength and a discipline that I did not have. She followed the proverb, the righteous choose their friends carefully. Grandma didn't know O.J. Nothing about him was relevant in her life, and O.J. never knew her. And so for her to spend any time thinking about this man was just a total waste of time, especially given what she could be doing, spending her life with real people, real family, real friends, real parishioners at her church, people who would know her name, people who would talk to her, people who would love her back, people she knew. But I just thought Grandma was crazy at the time. And then 14 years later, my very first hospice patient died. So in 2009, I started volunteering in hospice as a patient care a person. So I sit with people and talk with them, socialize with them, keep them company. And so I was assigned a man I'd never met before, and I went to visit him every week for the 6 months, and then he finally died. So this man, who had never been known to me before, in that period of time, 20 hours I spent with him, that's it, became a beloved friend. He looked forward to seeing me every week. I looked forward to seeing him. I heard all about his life, which was a remarkable life, and he wanted to know about me. We had a bond together, a friendship together, and of course, when he died, my heart just broke. I still miss him. He left me very sad with a big hole in my heart. And I remember feeling that terrible, terrible sadness on the day that he died on June the 23rd, 2009, and still feeling it 2 days later when somebody else died. The King of Pop died, and he happened to die the same day as Farrah Fawcett Majors from Charlie's Angels and Ed McMahon from The Tonight Show. It was this trifecta of death. If you remember the TV coverage, people were just distraught over his death. Candles, vigils, sobbing at the death of this person who did not know them and that they would never know, who could not ever call them by name. And I think about this. Can you imagine feeling that way about someone, and it's a phantom relationship? And so when Michael Jackson died, just in the confluence of my dear hospice patient dying, it was when I understood what Grandma said to me. Who is O.J.? So now I thought, okay, fine. No more celebrities, no more supermodels, no more knowing more about what Angelina Jolie's wedding dress looked like than knowing what my own sister wore to her anniversary dinner. And no more knowing more about Kate Middleton's morning sickness than I know about how my mother is feeling this morning. Now, for me, sometimes it's hard not to get up, look at the internet, and hit that button so that I can see what happened at George Clooney's wedding. But I gotta stop this. And you may sit here and think, what a weak-minded, silly woman, this is absolutely ridiculous. But I wonder sometimes how focused we get on knowing the ins and outs of lives of people we will never, ever know. Be they media celebrities or sports celebrities, they don't know us. We don't know them. It's empty. And so every time I resisted the last 6 weeks hitting on that George Clooney wedding, I could click on the blog of my dear friend who, in celebration of her 70th anniversary, decided to walk the entire 500 miles of the Camino de Santiago in Spain and France. And every day I could spend a few minutes with Sharon, hearing about what she'd done and feeling close to a person I know, I love, and who loves me too. So where are we choosing that emptiness? And sometimes, yes, it does make you feel a little isolated. When I walk down the aisles in a grocery store, I look at the covers of those magazines and I don't know who those people are. And I have to admit, every once in a while, it does cross my mind to really wonder, who Kim Kardashian is, because I have no idea who Kim Kardashian is. So my last one is an exercise of choosing elevation, to lift yourself up and lift yourself up. So my visual for this is a really difficult exercise, and we've seen this one in the Olympics. Men like this have extraordinarily strong arms, but you can't imagine the kind of core strength it takes to lift your legs up against gravity, parallel, and then hold them there. This is really, really hard. And I think this last one is really, really hard. Now, when we learn to do really hard exercises like this in our lives, it's often the case that somebody helps us to get there till we can bear it on our own. And when I was a little girl, it was my mother who helped me to do this exercise. Because when I was a kid, my sisters and I wanted nothing more in the world than to watch the Three Stooges. And my mother absolutely forbade this. It did not matter that we begged, that we pleaded, that all of our friends were watching the Three Stooges. She said absolutely no. And she would wag her finger at us. Monkey see, monkey do. And of course, she was probably right. She had 3 young, weak-minded little girls on her hands, and if we watched that stuff, then we would probably start twisting each other's noses and turning each other's ears and making a mess in our lives. She absolutely forbade it. Now, at my time in life, I could probably watch the Three Stooges and not go around boxing people's ears. But at that time, I couldn't, and so my mom kept me out of it. That monkey see, monkey do is one of those things that doesn't apply to just children. So my first job when I got out of graduate school was working at an advertising agency in downtown Chicago. And I'm kind of glad you didn't know me then, because you would not have encountered this lovely, charming, gently spoken woman. Because if it was possible to fit 5 swear words into one sentence, I could do it. And I could even put them in the middle of words after every syllable if I wanted to do it. Now, I wasn't raised in a house like that. But that's what everybody in the agency did. And it was one stream of it after another. It's what they did, it's what I did. And why? Because I wasn't discerning. I wanted to be more mature. I wanted to fit in with the crowd. I wanted to do what they wanted to do, so I talked like they talked. You start to do it there, you start to do it everywhere. You start to do it at home. You start to do it with strangers. And if you really are not careful, you start to do it with your mother, and the look on her face is really a shocked one. Benjamin Franklin put that monkey see, monkey do a different way. He said, if you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas. And I think I had a really bad case of fleas. Thank goodness I don't anymore. And it's made my life a lot calmer. In the Bible, there is so much that asks us to stay away from what pulls us down, no matter what is going on around us. The very first psalm in the book of Psalms, and the very first verse of that psalm I always love, it says, "Happy indeed is the man who follows not the counsel of the wicked, nor lingers in the way of sinners, nor sits in the company of scorners, but whose delight is the law of the Lord, and who ponders his law day and night. He's like a tree that is planted beside flowing waters, that yields its fruit in due season, and whose leaves shall never fade." I think that sounds so lovely. And that's all I've got to do is, well, to keep our monkey metaphor going, see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil. Not so easy in the world that we live in. One woman who suffered this the hard way, I was recently reading about, and her name is Francesca da Rimini. So you probably don't know Francesca because she died in 1285, murdered by her husband in the Divine Comedy. I started reading some Dante. And Virgil and Dante go into the second ring of hell, where there are the lustful, and there they encounter Francesca and her lover Paolo, who were caught in the act, and her husband, Giovanni, that's it. Now, Francesca is eternally damned in that ring of hell because she's unrepentant. She takes no responsibility for herself. She says a really interesting thing when Dante comes to hear her story. She says, well, Paolo and I, we were sitting together perfectly innocently, and we were reading a book, the story of Guinevere and Lancelot. Oh, so romantic. And then one thing led to another, and what's a girl to do? So you think, monkey see, monkey do, monkey dead forever. So this is an interesting thing. Can no one read the story of Lancelot and Guinevere without falling into sin? Of course not. But Francesca couldn't read that. She was not thinking about where her weakness was. Of course, she and Paolo were already starting to be in love with her, and this was just something that tipped the balance over. It was a little like alcohol to an alcoholic. I have a good friend who's a recovering alcoholic. She cannot ever have a glass of wine. I can have a glass of wine and be perfectly fine. I can't have a bottle of wine and be fine, but I can have a glass. I know where my weakness is, and that was Francesca's problem. She didn't know where her weakness was, and boom, she slid right into something that had her in big trouble. So where is my weakness? What can I not be around? So I'll tell you what I can't watch. So this has to do with movies and television. So here are 4 things I have seen I cannot watch. Because my weakness has to do with feeling very easily pulled into a dark view of the world, where things are discouraging. Keeping myself elevated is hard. Keeping myself away from all of those things that make me think humanity is worse than it really is are all things that these things pull me into. Now, I know it's award-winning TV, and some of this, it may be your favorite TV. But this isn't about you, it's about me. And I look at that and I think, what have I learned here by watching how many episodes of Sex and the City? I guess I've learned that there's a shoe designer named Manolo Blahnik who has, $1,000 shoes. And what have I learned watching how many episodes of The Sopranos? Have I been uplifted? Well, no, actually I've learned an awful lot about the inner workings of the American mafia and that I ought to stay out of New Jersey if I want to be safe at all. So these are things that I know I need to stay away from. This is a really touchy subject because it skates very close to the culture wars. And when I've said things like this to some people, I get a couple of different reactions. I get people who say to me, now wait a minute, this is my favorite television and it's won all kinds of awards. Don't you tell me what I can watch. Or people say, you know what, you're right, this is awful and I agree with you, it should be banned. Now, neither of those things is what I'm saying at all. Whenever you and I appear in the same sentence, you think I should, I agree with you, we should. We are now having a discussion about a corset, and we are not anymore having a discussion about strong abs. The culture wars are about the corsets we want to strap on each other. I don't want anybody strapping a corset on me. I don't want to strap a corset on anybody else. I want to stand upright like a ballerina, able to make choices of my own no matter what anybody else is doing. And that's what culture is, really, don't you think? It's the way we aggregate the choices other people are making. And so Christians don't have a hard time making choices. Let us pray that we can stand up for the choices we want to make and strengthen ourselves to focus on what lifts us up no matter what. But it takes discernment. And so this is one of these things, I think, when it comes to lifting us up, that we get very caught in. We say we have no choice. It's all around us, we have no choice. But we have choice. It's just a hard choice. And if there's one thing Christian people can do, I think it's make hard choices. So with exercising better, I think trying in my own life to choose calm, to focus on the substance of real relationships and real people, and to try to keep myself elevated. It doesn't mean I have to only watch the Disney Channel all the time. Really. You can watch stories of great human suffering and tragedy. You can watch things that contain violence. There are things that ultimately lift you up. It's you and I who have to make the determination. What is it doing to the state of our soul, and have the courage to walk away? Because I think if we don't practice all of these things, we're not ready to accept the invitation to the banquet of the Son of the King that comes to us every single day in the form of a needy person who needs to be served, in the form of a friend who needs help, in the form of the church bells on Sunday, at night when the dusk falls and there's a chance to thank God for the day, ask forgiveness, try again tomorrow. The invitation is out there all the time, and I want to hit that button that says, yes, I'll be there, and do this all the time. So that this idea, I think, of building a strong spine so that we remove the anxiety will let us live busy and active lives at peace. The way once that ballerina has built up that strong spine, she just goes in defiance of gravity, dancing whatever dance is presented to her, and doing absolutely beautiful because her core is strong no matter what her limbs are doing. So that's what I think. I think about Peter walking on that water. There's nothing I would like more than to have Christ say, come, and be able to get out of that boat and walk. So that's where I'm going to end tonight, everyone. Thank you all so much, and I hope it was of help to you. For me, if it results in nothing more than one conversation for a little while, one prayer, one thought for peace in our lives, I believe that if we aim for it and get it, He will never, ever take it away. So thank you all, and God bless you.